My name's Ed, and this is my record of production for my HSC major work. So I got the process started by doing a few hand sketches on some scrap paper, and eventually I came up with the designs that I was happy with. So I chose this final design, which I thought suited the aesthetics that I wanted to achieve in the end. So I took it to my computer on Fusion 360, where I was able to model up a similar looking design. And then with a few alterations I was ready to start building, and here we go. We then cut the shape out in a jig, which we're going to put the strips in to mold to the shape of the backrest. These 16 strips were then put in a waterbed where they were soaked for an hour. After moving these strips into a jig where they were clamped and rested for 5 days, the ultimate goal was to pre-bend the timber to a rough shape. After waiting 5 days to dry, I took them out of the jig to reveal the result, and exactly as planned, a rebound of 60% was achieved. This gave me the confidence to glue up my backrest. I used Gorilla Glue, which is a glue that has a long workability time frame, which I definitely needed for this project. And at the end, with the help of some classmates and teachers, we ended up tightening the clamps in time. 6 painful days of waiting to see if the backrest would hold shape. The day came to finally take it out. And thankfully, as planned, it turned out perfect. So I began the shaping process, a long but rewarding journey. First, flattening the base with a plane. And then cutting out a more detailed shape on the bandsaw. Coming back later with a router plane and a normal plane, I finally achieved a result I was happy with. However, these gaps really drove my head in. I then marked out 5 equal lines with the Kabata Japanese saw and cut them out to reveal a consistent angle, which I had to carve out in the backrest. And then the long shaping process using the router plane followed. Weeks and weeks of shaping. My next step was to use an orbital sander. I got down to a reasonable shape that I was happy with. And here it is, hours of work, in a simple video. And as you can see in this video, the cracks in my chair, which I'd later have to fill in down the road. So after the shaping was done, I had to work out what angles I wanted the legs at and what height I wanted the chair at. So obviously, using my seat, I sat in it, and found the best and most comfortable position I wanted, and modeled this with a test dummy. Using the measurements I found during this test, I cut out 2 front legs and brought it to the lathe to start shaping them. And again, using correct PPE, an apron, a face shield, and enclosed shoes, it was off we went to work. I first used a parting tool to get rid of the majority of material and work my way down the leg. I then came back with a roughing gouge, which was a lot easier to get to a nice shape that I wanted. And after a satisfying process, a final product was determined. And after a little bit of sanding, the legs were complete. Well, at least the front legs. Here's a nice little slow-mo. So I moved on to the back legs now. I wanted 2 tapers to make this chair look really smooth and round and elegant. And by using tape, I went to the bandsaw and cut out my tapers that I wanted. And with a few touch-ups, we were ready to connect them with the rail. And with the help of my teacher, we cut out the female part for my bridle joint, which I then later cut out. Partnered with the male joint, these front legs look really nice, and I had to repeat the process on the back legs again. Whilst I was doing this, I also made a jig, which accurately allowed me to drill the holes where the dowels were going to go to connect the legs to the backrest, and here it is. Then it was onto the gluing of the legs together. This seems like a really simple process because I skipped out the planning of how I made this jig, except it took a lot of time and thinking. Then I started to wrap the legs to make a smooth curve on it, and then here they are together, basically finished at this point. The next step was to make the middle of the chair, for the base of the seat to sit on, and here I am gluing up the pieces, which will make up the base of the chair. After that, we glued the base onto the seat, which fit perfectly, and you can see in a few details here of how perfectly it hugs the wood. In this video it might seem quite simple, but it took hours of work to get it like this. Moving on, I made the base of the seat. This started with 4 pieces of wood, and then we slowly cut it down on the table saw, which allowed us to get more of an accurate shape, and there it is on the seat. Then I went with the hand plane after it was all glued together, and then the machine plane, and wow, this went quick and used a lot of timber. In my breaks, I went to the metal workrooms and used that lathe to make brass dowels. Then using a plane and an orbital sander, I carved out where my curved seat would sit, and so it would sit flat on all four sides. And then there you can see there's barely any gaps. I then took my armrest to the disc sander, where I made a rough estimate of what I wanted my armrest to be like. This is the curve that I finalized in the end. And then here's about 10 minutes of my sanding process, which in the end probably took over 10 hours. I then used this really cool product called Walnut putty, which filled in tiny gaps in the chair. Then here we are, these little holes here are for my brass dowels, which in the end gave my chair a really nice finish. Then we're up to the last step of the process basically, finishing off with the Danish oil. I did about 3 coats in the end, and realised in this video that I needed a face mask because the fumes were insane. Then I glued the armrest to the legs, and basically here it is, all finished.